White House was bringing in both Obama and McCain, and he didn't seem to have policies for the economic crisis, and that seemed to be when his campaign took a downturn, frankly. But you were pointing out that before the Lehman crash, at the beginning of September in 2008, he was ahead of Barack Obama in the polls.
That's exactly right, and that would have been a very close race. And I think John McCain later on said that his own reaction to the economic collapse of September of 2008 was not his finest hour. But in retrospect, I think you would probably agree, Andrea, that there were very few Republicans who could have won the presidency that year after the twin difficulties of one or two very unpopular wars, plus a very big economic collapse, plus a two-term Republican president. Very hard, as you know, for any president nominee in history to win the presidency for one party 3 terms in a row. But the thing about John McCain is that this is not someone who depended on being president to be a great figure of American history. And look at how much we're talking about tonight that has nothing to do with the presidency, but we're talking about John McCain with the same degree of intensity and interest that I think we would almost if he had been president himself.
And I'm also thinking about his role in trying to legislate and change the guidelines that the Bush White House were following through Vice President Cheney, President Bush, Donald Rumsfeld, regarding detainees. He was, because he had been a prisoner of war,
Absolutely.
Was passionate about passing that legislation against what he said was torture.
He never wanted to forget what he had been through. And although the preponderance of the Republican Party and the incumbent president and vice president, just as you're saying, felt very strongly about those policies, and John McCain had made a big effort to try to get along with George W. Bush after that fierce fight that you talked about in the primaries of 2000, that really ended at things like torture and what he saw as an American attempt to use, he thought, some of the things that had been used against him as a POW in North Vietnam.
Thank you so much, Michael Beschloss. Joining us now is Nicole Wallace, host of Deadline White House, who was a senior advisor, of course, for John McCain's presidential campaign in 2008. Nicole, our condolences to you and all of the close advisors and aides who traveled with him, who fought for him, and who knew him so well and loved him so much.
Yeah, you and I started this conversation Friday, Andrea, at 4 when we were talking about his brave decision to end treatment. And so I think what you think about on days like this is even when you know it's coming, even when you've had, in his case, almost a year to grapple with the news that he has this horrible diagnosis, there's nothing that really prepares you for a world without John McCain in it. And we talked on Friday about that, the clarity of his voice after the Helsinki summit, the clarity of his convictions about what America is when it's at her best, about what the Republican Party has been when it's been at its best, and about what the Senate is when it's at its best. And if you look at sort of his body of public statements in the year since his diagnosis, they really touch all those 3 touchstones. And you think about his speech where I believe Vice President Biden introduced him, where he talked about this ideology of America first will end up in the ash heap of history, a strong, clear indictment of isolationism. You look at the written statement he released after Helsinki, and it was a strong and clear indictment of what he viewed as giving too much to Vladimir Putin, someone he views as a murderer and a thug. And you look at sort of the sadness with which he gave the first speech after the diagnosis about how the Senate should return to regular order, which probably doesn't mean very much to people who don't cover Washington or live in Washington, but those were institutions that meant the world to him, and after his family, probably the most to him. His country, our country's national security, the Republican Party, and sort of the prestige and power of the American presidency.
And when you speak about John McCain, the fact that he is receiving these tributes from all of the former presidents in both political parties, from senators, but also I have one here from Madeleine Albright, and it's not self-evident, but you know and I know that John McCain was responsible for the International Republican Institute, which he chaired, and she chaired the National Democratic Institute, traveling around the world, working together. This is one of the things that he legislated. He was very proud of it, and he was very active until his illness in it, chairing it. And she also, an octogenarian, traveling around the world as he did. I mean, he was never home during congressional recesses. He was always finding someone in the world. Mark Salter wrote about this in the Washington Post just now in something that is posted, finding, refugees, prisoners in Myanmar who said to him, we remember your voice. You called out our names, how much it meant to us, that you recited our names on Radio Free Europe or the Voice of America or one of those broadcasts.
Yeah, it's such an important piece of his legacy and probably not one that gets enough attention, but I think the reason he was as comfortable with Democrats as with Republicans, and that is as true of a thing as you will hear uttered today. He was as comfortable with his Democratic colleagues in the Senate as he was, and in a lot of cases more comfortable with his Democratic colleagues. He had a deep love for Ted Kennedy, and I remember during that 2008 campaign, Ted Kennedy calling him. Ted Kennedy, one of the earliest endorsers and someone who really celebrated and boosted the candidacy of then Senator Obama, and that friendship survived all those things because it was built on something more than a single presidential election cycle, even one with John McCain in it. But I think that the reason he viewed himself, not as sort of a hostage to the polarized politics that we are sadly living in right now, is because he traveled the world with people like Hillary Clinton, with Senator Klobuchar, with Democrats and Republicans, where, when you land in Georgia or you land in, Myanmar, you land in Afghanistan or Iraq, you don't land as a Democrat or Republican, you land as an American delegation. You land as, lawmakers and policymakers that can help the lives of the kinds of people you just described.
And some of his closest colleagues in this generation were Jack Reed and Chris Coons on the Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committees. There is really poignantly a statement from Vicky Reggie Kennedy. Today is the 9th anniversary of Kennedy's death from glioblastoma, from the same brain cancer. And on this day, she writes, "We lost an uncompromising patriot and a man of immeasurable courage. Getting to know John McCain was one of the great privileges of my life. I know my late husband, Ted, felt the same way. Like Teddy, John McCain loved the United States Senate and believed in its power to impact lives in a positive way. Indeed, he declared from the floor of the U.S. Senate that the proudest and most satisfying moments of his career were when he worked with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to address our greatest challenges." So that brings home exactly what you were saying, Nicole Wallace. Thanks so much, Nicole.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for doing this tonight.
And I know this is going to be a very difficult number of days. And Michael Beschloss, your thoughts as well?
Well, it's a day that we have known for some time would come, but the man was so absolutely full of life that it's almost impossible to imagine that it's here. And I think something we probably should talk about is that one way that he has spoken truth to power over the last year and a half is that he stood up to the incumbent president of the United States, Donald Trump. You were talking a little bit earlier, Andrea, about what John McCain said about President Trump's performance in Helsinki. This is a time that among Republican senators, there are not a lot of people who are going to have that role, so we're going to be living in a very different political world.
Indeed, we are. And in fact, one of his closest friends from all of his past campaigns, Lindsey Graham, has differed with John McCain in this period by maintaining that close relationship with the president. And that has probably caused some pain at various times during these many months. Let's bring in Chris Matthews, the host of Hardball. Chris, of course, on days like today, nights like tonight, we think of the greatness of this man. We've lost a great American patriot, a great public servant, a senator, a warrior, a politician, imperfect, he'd be the first to admit. And as I was just saying, on the 9th anniversary of Teddy Kennedy's death from this same terrible brain cancer.
Well, Well, I said this earlier tonight, and I still think it's the reason people love the gladiatorial aspect of politics, where it's really one against the other, and there's a real combat to it, and you look for guts, spiritual guts. You look for people that stick to what they believe and be their own person. And John McCain was always his own person. I mean, he wasn't a knee-jerk lefty or a knee-jerk righty. He didn't fit the mold, which was there for so many of these other politicians to sort of slip into. He was always John McCain, and he could be disconcerting. You could love him one day, and he's really mad at the next day because he wasn't there to make you like him. And that you would love him on McCain-Feingold on campaign reform, and you may not like him on being hawkish. But he was always John McCain. What I found him to be a character out of the movies, in the sense that if you were to write a romantic movie about American politics, and the U.S. Senate especially, you wanted to have heroes and people that really stood out and had guts, profiles, and courage, if you will. He would be a perfect candidate in real life for that romantic role. He was the classic U.S. senator. If you ever want to grow up to be a senator, I think you want to grow up to be John McCain. You wouldn't grow up to be just one of the votes for either party. You'd want to be someone who everyone wondered about where they're going to go and how they're going to vote and what's their conscience going to lead them to. And I also like the fact that he was a statesman in the sense that he, even though he could be incredibly tough on his opponents and bitter at times, he really did stand up for his opponent, Barack Obama, in a couple of critical moments. One was when that woman in the crowd said that he was an Arab, and she meant that in the worst possible way of saying something. And McCain could have said, yeah, and just gone along with that sort of slur. It was a slur to her. And instead he said, no, he's a decent man. We just have to disagree. And boy, that is so rare in politics today. He also gave a most wonderful testimonial to Barack Obama when they were going head-to-head about a couple weeks before the election in 2008. He was at the Al Smith dinner. And I was there, and I remember I went back and dug it up. We showed it last night. I hope everybody gets to see it again. It was the most grand endorsement, not endorsement, that's not the right word, testimonial to his opponent that you don't hear in politics today. It was wonderful. And he did it knowing that he was much the underdog. As you know, Andy, 2.5 weeks before that election, the market was dropping and everything was going haywire, and he was paying the brunt of it. And I thought that was the best of John McCain.